Welcome to Norland Stories, where shadows talk and secrets walk. Tonight, a puzzle even Nero Wolfe can't ignore. Sharpen your wits, it's time to enter Wolfe's world. If you've never seen a genius sulk, you should try catching Nero. Wolfe, on a Monday morning, when Fritz forgets to trim the orchid stems by exactly 1/8 of an inch. Add in a ringing doorbell at 10 minutes past 9, and you've got yourself a front row seat to the apocalypse. That particular Monday, the orchids were fine. The doorbell was not. Wolfe let out the kind of sigh that could curdle milk, lowered the Times crossword with all the grace of a man laying down his sword, and glared at the ceiling as if that might convince whoever was at the door to spontaneously combust. "I presume you're ambulatory, Archie," he muttered. "Last time I checked," I said, heading for the door. "Although, if it's another salesman with a revolutionary new vacuum cleaner, I might fake a stroke." The bell rang again, 2 quick bursts, urgent but not frantic. When I opened it, I saw a man who looked like he hadn't slept since Nixon resigned. Tall, late 60s, dressed like a librarian who'd lost a bet, brown corduroy blazer, elbow patches, and a tweed cap he clutched like a lifeline. He didn't say hello. He just shoved a thin, leather-bound journal into my hands and whispered he was on that train. I saw him yesterday. Then he turned and walked off fast. For a guy his age, impressive, hey? I called, but he was already down the steps, vanishing into the early Manhattan fog like a stage magician. Poof! I looked at the journal. Old. The initials TL were embossed in the corner. Back in the office, Wolfe didn't look up as I dropped it on his desk. He just reached for his beer. "Someone brought you a present," I said, with a side of cryptic prophecy that got his eyebrow to twitch, which, in Wolfe's world, is the equivalent of a fainting spell. He picked up the journal, examined the spine, then opened it. The first page had one sentence written in sharp, shaky ink. December 3rd, 1978. Last entry before the train disappeared. Wolfe closed the book with a snap. "Archie," he said slowly, "summon Mr. Kramer. Tell him we may have found his ghost train." By 11:30, the orchid room was sealed, the beer was chilled, and Wolfe was neck-deep in page 27 of a monograph on Madagascan moth orchids. I was on the couch rereading the journal, which, spoiler alert, didn't contain any murder confessions, treasure maps, or apocalyptic warnings. Just daily scribbles from a transit engineer named Thomas Langley, routine notes, teen, system schematics, mentions of a malfunctioning red line control panel dated December 1978. The week the 3062 Astoria vanished into a tunnel and never came out. Right on cue. The doorbell rang again. This time, I didn't even look at Wolf. He grunted. I walked. Our visitor wore black. Not funeral black, more like Wall Street, with regrets black. Slim charcoal coat, matched shoes. No umbrella, despite the drizzle outside. Her hair was precise, shoulder length, copper red. Not a strand out of place, and her face was that expensive kind of pale you get from good skincare and bad secrets. "Miss Claudia Langley," she said, offering a handshake like a business merger. "Archie Goodwin," I replied. "Come on in. The man upstairs is grumpy, brilliant, and occasionally helpful." She smiled, but it didn't touch her eyes in the office. Wolf didn't rise, of course not, but his eyes narrowed just a degree when he heard her name. "Langley," he said, "relation to Thomas." "He was my father," she said, sitting without being asked. A mild rebellion, Wolf style. "I take it you didn't drop that journal off this morning?" I said, taking my spot. "No," she said. "I haven't seen that journal in 47 years. It disappeared with him." Wolf lifted one brow. "You're saying the man who delivered it wasn't him," she said, quick. "It couldn't be. He died. I mean, he vanished." "Yet," Wolf said, tapping a finger on the leather binding, "the journal returned." She nodded, took a breath. "My father was on that train," she said. "The Red Line 306 to Astoria. December 3rd, 1978. He worked for the MTA. That afternoon, the train entered the East River Tunnel and never came out. No wreckage, no bodies, just ... gone. And now," I prompted, "2 nights ago, that same train emerged from the same tunnel at 3:06 sharp. Lights flickering, doors locked, empty, no driver, no damage. The system logs showed no scheduled route." Wolf closed his eyes for a beat, then opened them again. "Miss Langley, this is not a seance parlor. It's not ghosts I want you to find," she said, voice cracking just enough. "It's the truth." I watched her. Her mouth said calm, but her hands said panic. Right thumb rubbing the inside of her left wrist. Tiny tremor in the right eyelid. She was scared, but not of phantoms. Of something real. Wolf grunted. "Miss Langley, I dislike puzzles that do not yet define themselves. You are offering ambiguity, not a case." "I'll pay," she said, and named a figure that made me sit straighter. Wolf didn't flinch, which meant he was already interested. "Why now?" I asked. "Why come to us after 47 years?" She hesitated. "Because someone broke into my apartment last night. They didn't steal anything, just left a note on my pillow." "Okay," She reached into her coat and handed it over. Wolf read it aloud. Do not chase the train. It brought back more than you want to know. Wolf didn't say anything for a long time. Finally, he lifted his eyes to meet hers. You may proceed, Miss Langley. But I warn you, truth is a fare you may not wish to pay. There's a certain kind of buzz that creeps into your bones when a case stops smelling like smoke and starts burning real fire. Wolf had kicked me out, politely. For him, with a list of names, Claudia Langley dropped during our little ghost train summit for stops. One pair of good shoes and a half-eaten corned beef sandwich later, I was knee-deep in the living, the lying, and the long dash buried dot. First up, Howard Clemens, age 82, current occupation, pigeon feeder. Former head of Red Line. Operations in 1978. He lived in Queens in a brick walk-up with wallpaper older than disco. When he opened the door, I got a whiff of mothballs and secrets. You, one of those podcasters, he croaked. Nope, just a friend of orchids and old trains. That got me a grunt and entry. Howard wasn't subtle. He spent the entire conversation looking everywhere but at me. According to him, the train didn't vanish. It derailed into the river and was covered up for insurance reasons. Said the MTA buried the whole thing. You expect me to believe they lost a whole subway car and called it an accounting error? He shrugged. You don't lose a train. You misplace it long enough for people to forget. But here's the part that got me when I showed him a photo of the journal. His fingers twitched. I haven't seen that in decades, he said, which wasn't what I asked. Janice Varelli had the kind of walk that said she used to be feared in rooms full of men who smelled like grease and power. These days, she ran a consultancy out of a midtown office stacked with labor plaques and faded protest photos. She didn't blink when I said, Langley, good man, too smart. Should have quit while he still had faith in the system. You think? He found something. I think he found someone he wasn't supposed to. She poured herself coffee, didn't offer me any. Rude, but classy. Langley filed a whistleblower complaint. December 2nd, 78. Said someone was rerouting Red Line. Power grids. After hours. Unauthorized. Did he say who? She nodded toward a file cabinet. That report vanished 2 days after the train did. Along with half the witnesses and you. I stayed quiet. I had a family. And fear doesn't expire, Mr. Goodwin. It just gets smarter. You've met Denny before, not literally, but the type. Yellowed eyes, nicotine breath, and a voice that sounds like he eats drywall for breakfast. We met outside a bar near the Hudson Yards yard, his turf, and his security blanket. I was in the tunnel that day, he rasped. Heard it go in. Never heard it come out. What did you hear instead, He leaned in. Nothing, like the tunnel, swallowed it. Like, ... vacuum. Any theories? He sipped cheap beer, then whispered, "The train ain't what came back. That's something wearing its skin." No, I believe in things that wear faces to keep us from screaming. Well, great. Just the kind of answer to keep me warm on a subway platform at midnight. Last on the tour was the one who smelled the cleanest and probably WASN. Single quotes T. Trevor Brandt. City councilman, sunglasses. We met at City Hall. Because, of course, we did. "I'm aware of the resurfacing," he said, voice like a well-oiled machine. "Public transit anomalies are not uncommon in this city. Is that what we're calling time-traveling ghost trains now?" He smiled, not amused, calculated. "Mr. Goodwin, the last thing New York needs is hysteria. Especially over an incident no one officially remembers. And Langley. Tragic accident. My father knew him, actually, spoke well of him. Your father worked in transit, energy sector. But everything's connected, isn't it?" Yeah, I thought. Especially when you don't want people pulling at the wires. By the time I returned to the brownstone, my shoes hated me. My coat smelled like subway beer. And I had a notebook full of shady characters with tightly zipped mouths. Wolf was waiting. In his chair, eyes closed, fingers steepled. "Well," he asked. I dropped the notebook on his desk. "We've got a city full of people pretending they forgot a train. Wolf, and a woman being warned not to remember." He opened one eye. "Then we shall, Archie. We shall remember for them. I've had plenty of late-night calls, but none that began with a scream. Not over the phone, I mean in real life. Live, blood-curdling, the kind that slices through the night like a straight razor and leaves you running before your brain even catches up." It came from just outside Claudia Langley's apartment building on the Upper West Side. I was parked across the street in the Plymouth, doing a routine tale after her meeting with someone she said was an old friend who knew things. I never trust those kinds of friends. Turns out I was right. By the time I reached the alley, the street lamp above was flickering like it had stage fright. Claudia stood there, frozen, staring down at what was left of Denny Probst, the maintenance guy from the tunnels. Except he wasn't the same Denny. This version had a crushed larynx. One eye wide open, like it had seen something it shouldn't. And a strange black smear across his palm. Asphalt. No. Burned oil. Charcoal. Tunnel grease. I knelt down and checked his pulse anyway, for tradition. Then I looked up at Claudia. "What happened?" She shook her head, tears on her cheeks, but no sobbing. Just stunned silence. "I was supposed to meet someone," she said. "That's all." I didn't know she didn't need. To finish, the city has rules. One of them is when people with long-buried secrets start dying. You're officially out of the crossword puzzle phase. I called it in. Gave the badge flashers my best innocent bystander routine and made a beeline. For the brownstone, Wolf looked like I'd just interrupted a violin concerto, I assume. He said, "There's a cadaver involved. Name's Denny Probs. He's the guy who said the train came back wearing its own skin." Colorful. Is Miss Langley injured? No, just shaken. But someone wanted her to see this. Steepled his fingers and stared at the globe like he was waiting for it to spin back to 1978. Then the game has commenced, he said. Finally. Yeah, I said. But the prize might be a body count. He opened the journal again. Langley's, the original one. Flipped to the last page. He pointed to a line scrawled in the margin in almost invisible ink. Like it had been added last minute. Some doors don't lead out, they lead under. Under what? I asked. Wolf looked up. His eyes were bright now. Alive, under the city. Under the records. Under the truth. I poured myself a drink I hadn't earned and took a long one. Boss, I said. Someone's killing people. To stop this story from getting out. And if that's their opening move, then let us not wait for their closing one, Wolf said, voice low and sharp. He looked at the note from Claudia's pillow again. It brought back more than, "You want to know, Archie," he said. "Call Inspector Kramer and inform him we are officially at war." It was Wolf who found it, naturally. The rest of us had been barking up the usual haunted subways and shadowy cover-up trees. But Wolf, seated in his throne with a glass of Montenegro and a glare that could kill weeds, found a key in the quiet. "Archie," he said, without looking up from the journal. "Fetch me the file from Langley's complaint. The copy Miss Forelli gave you." I did. It was thin, only 2 pages, dated, partially redacted, typed on onion-skinned paper that felt like it might crumble if you breathed too hard. Wolf read it slowly, line by line, then pulled out the final page of Langley's journal again and placed the 2 side by side. "You see it?" he asked. I didn't, which meant he was about to enjoy himself. Compare the coordinates, Langley reported in his final inspection, the ones tied to the anomalous relay activity. I leaned over Dot in the complaint. Red line substation 1 to see tunnel node 147A. In the journal, 147A, new junction welded. Work crew insisted on no log. Still nothing clicked. Then Wolf pointed to a faded corner note in the complaint form, a rubber-stamped line with a supervisor's approval code, cleared TB. I blinked. Wait, TB? That's not Thomas Langley. That's Trevor Brant, Wolf said, lips curling in triumph. Our polished councilman with the inherited grin and the conveniently short memory. I sat back. Brent's father, energy sector. Connected to Langley, connected to tunnels, connected to silence. You think the father was involved in rerouting power grids back then. I think Thomas Langley discovered a covert network buried beneath the MTA system. Wolf said, and I think it had less to do with electricity and more to do with movement. Movement of what? Wolf raised a brow. Not what Archie, who I hit the street. 2 hours later, in a dusty back room of the Transit Authority Records building, helped along by a very sleepy clerk and a crisp $50 bill, I found the missing logbook, and there it was. A manual transfer sheet dated December 3rd, 1978, 1 hour before the disappearance. Rerouted, car 9061. Red line to emergency line 9B, off-grid. Authorized by B. Trevor. Line 9B didn't exist on any current maps. Back at the brownstone, Wolf closed the file and stared at the globe. So they moved the train off the grid. Not by accident, with authorization. Why? He looked up at me, eyes gleaming, because someone needed it to disappear. As I paced the room, the weight of it hit me. Not just a ghost train, not just sabotage, a deliberate relocation. A vanishing by design. Maybe the train never crashed. Maybe it never meant to come back. But now it had. And someone was killing. To erase what rode in with it. Wolf poured himself a fresh glass. Now, Archie, he said, shall we tighten the noose? It wasn't my first time shaking a cage until something bared its teeth. But this one felt personal. Maybe it was the blood on the rails. Maybe it was Claudia's eyes. Or maybe it was Wolf's voice echoing in my head like a cold warning. Someone needed that train to disappear. And right now, the person most in need of a reminder that we weren't playing anymore was Janice Forelli. I waited until dusk, when the traffic outside her window was thick enough to muffle conversation, and the receptionist had long gone home. She was at her desk, working late, or pretending to. Her eyes flicked up when I walked in. Mr. Goodwin, you found another dead man. I didn't sit. We found a name, Trevor Brant. His father authorized the reroute. Your union buried the paperwork. She didn't flinch, but her hand paused over the keyboard. You're playing with matches, Archie. No, they played with a city. We're just following the smoke. She leaned back, cool as a crypt. I told you I stayed quiet back then. That hasn't changed. I stepped closer. Tell me about emergency line 9B that got her a flicker. Something between memory and fear doesn't exist, she said too fast. but you know it does. She stared out the window. Long pause. Then she said softly, "We called it the Bone Line. Come again, unofficial name. An old tunnel predates the subway. Built during the war, not the good one, the quiet one. Cold War, CIA ran movement operations beneath the city. The MTA didn't talk about it, they just kept laying new rail over old rot. Langley found it." Her voice dropped. "He found it and realized someone was using it. Not for freight, for people, shipments that didn't make it to manifest. Workers that never punched out. The kind of disappearances nobody files reports on." I felt the hairs rise on my neck. And the train, she stood now, didn't look at me. It was full that day. Not just commuters. There was a car locked from the inside. No conductor, no schedule, no windows. Cargo. She shook her head. "Prisoners." I said nothing. Couldn't she? Looked back at me. And for the first time since I met her, Janice Forelli looked scared. They were supposed to vanish. Off the books. And they did. Until now. She nodded. Slow. Something came back. And it wants to be remembered. When I relayed all of it, Wolf didn't speak for nearly 2 minutes. Kia just swirled his beer and stared at the edge of his desk. Then, "The question is no longer what happened in 1978, he murmured. "It is what else survived it." I asked if he meant the passengers. He shook his head. "No, Archie. I mean the intent. People say the dead tell no tales. They're wrong. The dead scream through the cracks the living try to plaster over. All you have to do is press at the seams hard enough, and something always gives. This time, the crack was a wire transfer buried in transit union accounts. Not by a criminal, not by a thug, by Claudia Langley. Yeah, the grieving daughter and the money. Quiet drip of $5,000 a month, every month, to a dormant LLC in Jersey that had no employees, no website, and no paper trail, except 1. A post office box linked to Trevor Brandt's re-election committee, Miss Langley. Wolf said, his voice calm but loaded like a revolver under a silk napkin. "You've been very helpful, too helpful, which is why Mr. Goodwin and I began to suspect you were also very ... selective." She froze. I slid the report across Wolf's desk. Money trail. Tidy, but not perfect. You've been paying someone to keep a secret, or to stay quiet about yours. She didn't speak for a long moment. Then she smiled. Bitter, tired. It was a bribe, but not the kind you think. "Convince us," Wolf said. She sat down, hands folded. Voice quiet. "My father wasn't just investigating a rerouted train. He was helping someone get out A woman, a whistleblower from inside the federal system. He was supposed to put her on that train, hidden in the cargo car. Hidden from whom? The government. Or at least the part that still thought in Cold War shadows. Langley wasn't just trying to expose the bone line. He was using it. Wolf's eyes gleamed. You were the contact, he said. At 21 years old, she nodded. Brant's father helped set the escape up. Not for noble reasons. She had documents. Things that could ruin his political career if she ever talked. He wanted her gone. And the money, I said. Insurance, she whispered. I've been paying Brant's son to keep the past buried. I thought it was over until the train came back. Wolf leaned back. So your father vanished with the woman he was trying to save. And now that train has re-emerged, empty, or seemingly so. I don't know what's inside it, she said. I just know. I wasn't supposed to survive that day either. She looked at me, then at Wolf. I switched shifts with someone. At the last second, that train was supposed to take me to. And now, people around you are dying, I said. She gave a dry laugh. You think I haven't noticed? Wolf stood, which he rarely did without purpose. Miss Langley, he said, voice cool, you are no longer a client. You are a participant. You are tangled in something old, something unfinished, and something prepared to finish you. Blinked. So, what do I do? Wolf turned to me. Archie. Assemble, everyone, here. Tomorrow night, the reveal. I asked. No, he said. The trap. New York isn't built for silence. It's a city that hums even in grief. So when a second body drops, this time in a subway tunnel beneath Brooklyn, and the victim's neck is twisted like someone wrung it with a wrench, people notice, and this time the press noticed. To dot the morning edition of the Post ran the headline, Subway Spook Strikes Again. Retired MTA official found dead in abandoned tunnel. There was a grainy photo of Clement's body being wheeled out of a maintenance shaft beneath. Hoyt-Schermerhorn. Called me just after 6. Her voice was cracked glass. He's gone. Warned him not to talk to you. He said it didn't matter anymore. I didn't say anything because the real kicker. He was found beside a door labeled 9B, bolted shut from the inside. Inspector Kramer arrived at the brownstone at 9:47 a.m., wearing the look of a man who'd slept in his coat and liked it even less than the person he was about to yell at. You too want to explain, he said. Why? My precinct is suddenly full of reporters asking about ghost trains, Cold War spooks, and dead Union men. Wolf didn't rise. He did, however, lower the New Republic, which is the Wolf version of flipping a desk. "We warned you," he said. "This is not a sequence of murders. It is a continuation of one long, unburied act." Kramer scoffed. "You want me to believe two dead men 47 years apart are part of the same homicide?" "No," Wolf said, calmly. "I want you to believe it was never solved to begin with." While Wolf argued semantics with the force of nature, that is, Inspector Kramer, I dug deeper. I found something in the city archives that made my skin try to exit my body. A classified maintenance map from 1977, showing Tunnel 9B, but not ending. At the East River, it kept going, beneath the federal courthouse and the address of a long-defunct shell company tied to Brandt Energy Holdings. Guess who authorized its demolition in 1979? Councilman Brandt, SR. And guess which building's foundation records were sealed by federal court order? Same. When I laid all that on Wolf, he did something I hadn't seen him do in weeks. He stood up, not to yell, not to eat, to think on his feet. "Moving. We are no longer merely tracing a train," he muttered. "We are tracing a disappearance that was institutional, political, and possibly, still active." "Boss," I said, "whoever's behind this, they're still willing to kill to keep it hidden." He looked at me, grim. "Then we must step ahead of them before the next body is ours." When Nero Wolfe smirks, it's like watching a glacier wink. Slow, rare, and usually fatal to someone in the vicinity. This time, it happened over toast. We were halfway through breakfast eggs. Soft, bacon crisp, conversation minimal, when I brought up a detail from Claudia's old photographs. Specifically, a picture from her father's briefcase showing the original 1978 transit blueprints. She said the police had dismissed them decades ago. A line was crossed, out in red pencil, Tunnel 9B, and stamped condemned. Structural risk, but in the corner, tiny and handwritten, was a time. 1:47 a.m. I had breezed past it. So had Kramer. So had everyone. Wolf did not. He stabbed his egg with a fork, glanced up, and said quietly, 1:47. "Yeah," I said. "Probably just the time it was redacted." He paused. Then he smirked. "There is number 1:47 a.m. in bureaucracy." He pushed back from the table, slowly. "Archie, get me the city's historical subway control logs for December 3rd, 1978, and the weather report. Planning a picnic. No, a revelation." He walked to the globe in the office and spun it gently, like a man testing gravity. "They weren't hiding the tunnel," he said. "They were hiding what passed through it at precisely that time. The train. No. Something on it. And just like that, things clicked into place faster than a subway turnstile during rush hour. 1:47 a.m. wasn't an editing note. It was a timestamp, exact time of the train's disappearance, and the tunnel's demolition scheduled for 1:55 a.m., which meant the train vanished 8 minutes before the site was supposedly destroyed. Only it never was. The tunnel still existed, just blocked, sealed, and scrubbed off the maps, like it was never meant to be found again. Wolf paced the room once, then settled into his chair like a king reclaiming his throne. He steepled his fingers, eyes closed, nodding once to himself. They didn't lose the train, he murmured. They stored it. For how long? I asked. Wolf opened his eyes. Until it was useful again. The smirk returned. A predator's smile, not of hunger, but recognition. It was precisely 3:06 p.m. when Inspector Kramer stormed through the door like a man trying to win an argument with a hurricane. He didn't knock. He didn't ask. He just entered, one meaty hand gripping a man by the collar, the other waving a folded arrest warrant like it was a winning lottery ticket. Wolf, he barked. Got him. You can fold your tent now. Wolf looked up from his chair, unimpressed. Must you shout? My orchids are not deaf. The man in Kramer's grip was Dr. Russell Langley, the city's former forensic archivist, tall, pale, and twitchy, with a nervous blink that had earned him the nickname Ticker among his peers. Found this rat leaving a midtown storage unit, Kramer said, tossing a plastic folder onto Wolf's desk. Inside was a transit radio log, edited copies. Originals were missing. He jabbed a finger. That's obstruction. Plus tampering. Plus conspiracy to withhold public records. And you know what that smells like. I imagine you'll tell me, Wolf said, not looking up. Motive. He knew about Tunnel 9B, covered up the fact that it was never demolished. Wolf lifted the folder with 2 fingers as if it were a soiled napkin, flipped through the pages, then a low, amused grunt. Inspector, if you must plant your flag, at least do so on solid ground. This, he held up one of the edited logs, was printed using Calibri, a font invented in 2004. Kramer blinked. So, these documents are counterfeits, Wolf said smoothly. Clumsy ones. Dr. Langley's only crime is being an unremarkable forger. I added helpfully, and maybe a bad tipper. Kramer growled. You saying he's not involved? Oh, I'm sure he knows things, Wolf said. But he didn't orchestrate a 47-year vanishing act that required someone with power, access, patience, I stepped in. We found something in the journal. Kramer, page 43. A reference to a ghost manifest, a second set of names, not on public record. Wolf nodded. Langley may have known the ghost manifest existed, but he wasn't on it. So who was? That, Wolf said, folding his hands, is what I shall reveal. But not in your current state of agitation. Kramer scowled, cheeks red. Wolf, if you're wrong, I am not. Fine. I'll be back with the rest of them. You always are. As the door slammed, Wolf leaned back, utterly satisfied. You know what's amusing, Archie? What's that? Could have told him before he arrested Langley. Why didn't you? Wolf sipped his beer. Because sometimes justice requires humiliation. Wolf didn't stand up. That would have been a miracle. But he did something nearly as rare. He looked me square in the eye and asked, Archie, I require the manifest from December 5th, 1978. The true one. I blinked. You mean the ghost manifest? He nodded. And not a copy. The original. That's how I found myself back in Brooklyn, chasing down a woman who hadn't been seen since the Carter administration. Diana Wexley, former transit clerk, whistleblower, and the last person to log train 808 before it vanished into the dark. She'd gone underground. And I don't mean metaphorically. A cousin, a retired janitor, and 3 dead ends later. I found her in Brighton Beach, living under a false name and feeding stray cats behind an old Ukrainian bakery. I said what I had to, she told me. But nobody listened back then. Why should I talk now? Because, I said, showing her the forged logs. They're rewriting your story. Again. That got her. It was wrapped in oilcloth and sealed in an old oatmeal tin. A yellowing, handwritten list with 43 names. But here's the kicker. 6 of the names were high-ranking officials from a little-known Cold War division under the Department of Urban Planning. One of them had become deputy mayor. Another, the missing architect, Sebastian Krill. At the bottom, written in red pencil, Order, Black Orchid Protocol, Tunnel 9B, do not publicize. As I held the manifest in my hands, I realized something that made my stomach turn. The train wasn't lost. It was hidden, deliberately, and every corpse we'd dug up since, every silence, every lie, traced back to someone who'd once believed they were saving the city by sacrificing 43 lives. I called Wolf from a payphone with the wind howling off the Atlantic. I've got it, I said. He only replied, come home and bring the truth with you. Wolf's office was a pressure cooker with bookcases. 6 suspects, 2 detectives, and 1 genius who hadn't moved an inch from his chair and didn't need 2 Wolf's rights, sat Diana Wexley, clutching the manifest like it might bite. Next to her, gritting his teeth so hard I thought he'd crack a molar, was Councilman Lawrence Prynne. On the couch, Eloise Krill, widow of the architect. Fingers trembling as she clutched a silk handkerchief that didn't belong to her. In the far corner, trying very hard to be invisible, was Gregory Hahn, the former MTA engineer who retired just before the train vanished. And standing stiff by the globe, as if guarding the exit, was Inspector Kramer, arms folded, jaw clenched. I stood by the door, just in case someone got ideas. Wolf let the silence stretch, the kind of silence that bends a room in half. Then he exhaled, picked up the manifest with 2 fingers, and began. "This," he said, "is not a ghost story. It is a story of bureaucracy, of cowardice, and of murder." No one dared speak. The train did not vanish by accident. It was diverted, hidden in Tunnel 9B, an unused Cold War infrastructure project beneath Manhattan, classified under the Black Orchid Protocol. Gregory Hahn stirred. Wolf looked at him sharply. "You falsified the rail records. You helped detour the train under federal orders. You were told it was a counter-tour operation." Hahn whispered, "I didn't know they'd seal it." With them still inside, Wolf turned next to Councilman Prynne. "You were a city aide back then. You ensured no investigation reached Tunnel 9B. You later rose in politics, funded by firms connected to underground real estate." Prynne's lip curled. "You have no proof. I have your signature on a 1980 directive to destroy the Tunnel 9B blueprints, witnessed by Mr. Hahn and stamped by the same agency that paid Krill to design the tunnel in the first place." He flicked a photo toward Prynne, a faded shot of a younger man. Glasses, handing a file to Krill on the construction site. Now Wolf addressed Eloise Krill. "You knew your husband hadn't run off. You received a letter, unsigned, months after the disappearance." She swallowed. It said, "The train sleeps beneath your city. Forgive me." His handwriting, Wolf said. He knew the truth. He tried to stop it. That's why he was silenced. Archie, and that's why the train was sealed again after it surfaced. So no one would find his body with the others. Wolf held up one last item, the journal that started it all. This journal belonged to Thomas LaRue, transit cop, whistleblower. He was the man who visited us, then disappeared the next day. A collective breath sucked in. He had learned the train was about to be unearthed, an accidental maintenance error that rerouted power. He panicked. He came to us, and the next morning he was found dead in the East River. Wolf turned to the only one who hadn't spoken yet, Diana Wexley. "You tried to save him. He was your brother." She nodded once, eyes glassy. Wolf's gaze swept the room. So, 43 victims, one returned train, and 5 people in this room who tried to erase it all. Then, to Kramer. Inspector, I suggest you arrest Councilman Prin for obstruction of justice, conspiracy, and accessory to multiple murders. Kramer cracked his knuckles and stepped forward. As the cuffs clicked shut, Wolf picked up his beer. Bah, he muttered. The lengths men will go to bury their guilt, as if concrete can silence ghosts.